أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Dear sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This week's discovery of the remains of 215 indigenous children at a formal residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia, has once again exposed the dark side of the Canadian history. Canadian government had formed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which issued its report in 2015. According to the estimates given in that report, approximately 4,000 to 6,000 children died because of abuse and neglect in the residential school systems, which ran until 1996. Between the late 1800s to 1996, approximately 150,000 First Nations Métis Inuit children were separated from their families and forced to attend boarding schools. For what? What was the purpose of establishing these boarding schools? The Truth and Reconciliation Commission report clearly says these residential schools were created for the purpose of separating Aboriginal children from their families in order to minimize and weaken family ties and cultural linkages and indoctrinate children into a new culture, the culture of legally dominant Euro-Christian Canadian society. The schools were in existence for well over 100 years. Children were abused physically and sexually and then died in the schools in numbers that would not be tolerated in any school system anywhere in the world. And who ran these schools? Who were administrating these schools? The report further says Roman Catholics, Anglican, United, Methodist, and Presbyterian churches were the major denominations involved in the administration of the resident school systems. Forced assimilation existed as early as 17th century, but the practice became Canadian public policy by the late 1800s. In these residential schools, children were forbidden from practicing their culture. They were not even allowed to speak to one another in their own language. They were forbidden. They were often subjected to physical and sexual abuse. What we see in this suffering inflicted upon the indigenous people is that the Canadian government and all the Canadian churches were partners in crime. The good thing about the government of Canada, and especially the Ontario provincial government, is that it came forth with an apology and acknowledging their role. For example, in 2016, Ontario finally found the courage to acknowledge and apologize for the mistreatment of Indigenous peoples. The Premier at the time made a statement, and I've quote that, where he says, "From coast to coast to coast, the residential school system set out to take the Indian out of the child." Mark the words, to take the Indian out of the child by removing Indigenous children from their homes and systematically stripping them of their languages, cultures, laws, and rights. Children were physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. Many died. These are the words of the Premier of Ontario in 2016. Justin Trudeau made a very powerful statement on this matter. And I quote him, "As Prime Minister, I am appalled by the shameful policy that stole Indigenous children from their communities. Our thoughts are with Sekopim First Nation, the Indian band in Kamloops, British Columbia, and with all Indigenous communities across Canada. Sadly, this is not an exception or an isolated incident. We are not going to hide from that. We have to acknowledge the truth residential schools were a reality, a tragedy that existed here in our country, and we have to own up to it. In the words of the Prime Minister, kids were taken from their families, returned damaged or not returned at all, with no explanation until this week. People are hurting, and we must be there for the survivors. So the government of Canada has come out very frankly, openly, and apologized. What about the apology from the Roman Catholic Church, which ran the Kamloops residential school from 1893 to 1969? After all, one of the 94 recommendations made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a papal apology, since residential schools constituted a cultural genocide. In a visit to the Vatican in 2017, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau personally asked the Pope to consider such a gesture, yet no apology has been forthcoming. This was again brought up this week by Canada's Indigenous Services Minister, Mark Miller, where he said, "I think it is shameful that they haven't done it, and it hasn't been done to date." The way I look at it, what happened to the children of the Indigenous people in Canada is worse than apartheid. In apartheid, the occupier or the colonial power tries to keep the two nations separate, although subjugating the other in different ways, but the subjugated nation still maintained its language, its culture, and its faith. Whereas here was the attempt to eliminate the language, the culture, and faith of the indigenous people by separating their children and keeping them for so long in residential schools that they would forget their language, they will forget their culture, and they will forget their faith. Even when these children return to their tribes, there would be language and cultural barrier between them and their parents and grandparents. They lost their identity. They lost their history. In a tour organized by York Region Police Force for religious leaders of the region in May 2017, I had the opportunity to visit Georgina Island First Nations just north of us and came to know about their history and suffering of their children. And the way they narrated it, it was indeed very painful to hear. While we, as new and not so new immigrants, enjoy many rights and privileges as Canadian citizens, we should not forget the suffering of the First Nations. The least that we can do is to learn about their history and support their struggle for justice. After all, we are followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Imam of justice and the voice of human justice around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give wisdom to the people who are in charge in order to be fair and just in their dealing with the indigenous people in Canada. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help the humanity against the coronavirus. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten the appearance of the Imam of the time, the son of Ali bin Abi Talib in form of Al-Mahdi, who will bring about, inshaAllah, global peace and tranquility. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.